Hey y'all, this is aemok,
Madam Hexe,
and kayce,
and this is Trouble Comes in 3. This podcast discusses scandalous topics like communication and sexual health, along with kink, leather, and ethical non-monogamy. If you're under 18, please leave us and check out scarletteen.com. For those over 18, welcome, and let's get historical.
Oh, changing it up today.
We are.
'Tis the season, as it were.
It is.
Tis the season. So we're getting historical tonight.
Special episode.
It's a special episode. It's Pride Month, y'all.
Ooh.
Woot. So we wanted to kind of dive in a little bit on some really important moments and movements and groups in the history of Pride and even before.
Right. Now, we can't possibly touch on everything.
No.
And these are kind of like the broad strokes of, key events, like you said, key organizations kind of dotted across the U.S. at the time, because we could probably spend days doing this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Let's go back in time a little bit, shall we? I was like Baymax from from victories.
Perfect.
Let's go back to the 1950s.
All right. Good old 1950s.
Right,
Ooh.
when everything, the good old days. The good old days, as some particular people like to call it. Let's talk a little bit about an organization called the Mattachine Society that was conceived of actually in 1948 by the founder, Harry Hexe. He wanted kind of like a gay activist group, and he was at a party, and he was pitching this idea, and a bunch of gay blokes were like, yeah, that sounds amazing. He's like, awesome, cool. He went home that night, wrote kind of like the manifesto called The Call, and then none of those guys wanted anything to do with it the morning after because the booze had worn off. And to be honest, for good reason, because you could get into trouble being gay in America at this time, right?
Yeah. You could get arrested, you could get fined, you could be thrown in jail.
Beat up.
Beat up. Beyond that, if you were caught, oftentimes that information leaked or was just flat out published in local media, so you ran a chance of losing your job, losing your family if you were currently passing in a relationship, losing your biological family if they found out you were gay and were disowned. That was a really serious problem during this time.
And the Mattachine Society, to my knowledge, was not strictly only for gay men. They did allow gay women to be part of the efforts, like the activism and things like that, but there wasn't a lot of formal spaces and advocacy groups for queer women yet. That kind of spawned from once the Mattachine Society was kind of like a known organization. It kind of, I think, gave courage to other groups, more niche groups, to start coming out on their own. Yeah. Originally, they adopted a philosophy of assimilation, that we could appeal to the heteronormative world if we appeared just like them, if we were civil and we behaved like they do. Never mind that your lifestyle was considered radical by those terms. The thought was, if we can play nice, they'll give us the rights we deserve, and then we can go back to doing what we normally do.
It was very much a, let's not throw it in their face.
Right.
Let's not make it overt.
Right.
Try to appear as straight passing as humanly possible in your interactions, the way, you don't talk about things.
Right. That was difficult for, like we were talking about earlier, drag queens, femme-presenting, very flamboyant individuals, which existed, but they had to tone themselves down for their own safety. And as a survival technique of an organization, it's not a bad idea when there is such a threat. However, civility doesn't always breed results, and results were what was needed at the time. I think it was 1953 that they decided we're going to change our angle, and they became a little more less inclined to assimilate and more kind of like, no, this is how we are, this is how we're going to do things. That's also about the time when they decided that most of the Mattachines were actually of the communist movement, which gave cops even more reason to come down on you, because not only are you a gay threat, but you're also a red threat. And this was, of course, at the height of the Red Scare in the U.S. about communism taking over the world. So it was just one more reason for them to hate you.
And it was also something that was already being thrown at gay individuals.
Oh, yeah, they're all communists.
They were all communists.
Yep.
They were sent here to
undermine American values,
democracy and values, and make us a red state. That was already something that was very often thrown at why gays couldn't be
congregate.
They couldn't congregate. They couldn't hold jobs in certain areas, things like that.
Oh gosh, God forbid. But on the other side of the coin, 1955 in San Francisco, the Daughters of Bilitis. So that is one of the first lesbian activist organizations. They were focused on kind of political rights and activism in that nature. They kind of branched off from the Mattachine Society because they felt that the lesbian community wasn't getting a voice necessarily as much. And at the time, so it was kind of starting to ride on that new wave of feminism where lesbians found that they at the time had more in common with straight women than they did with gay men. Because you may have been a gay man, but you're still a man. And so you still somehow had a little more sway in the world than a lesbian woman or even a straight woman.
And throughout history, lesbians or bisexual women don't exist.
Right.
Nope. They are wonderful for the male gaze.
Yes.
They exist in this erotic fantasy world. But actual real life women who want to fuck women
and only women
don't exist.
No. Yeah.
So much so that they were even erased from the first United Congress of Women. Anything referencing lesbianism was completely removed from the program the day of.
For the same reasons that the Mattachines were playing nice to begin with, is because at that time, and that's more related to the feminist movement at the time, is that we have to, as women and feminists, have to appeal to a male-dominated society in order to get what we want. And at the time,
lesbians were not that.
They're not there for men.
They're not going to play into the fantasy.
Right, and since men couldn't find a way to utilize a lesbian, there was no reason for them to play ball. So that's why a lot of and we'll get into that too, because I know you've got some good stuff up your sleeve about that. Now, nothing was perfect in the beginning. The Daughters of Bilitis, for example, did have some controversy as the years went on. Part of that has to do with the feminist movement that Kaitlyn is going to talk about, where there was an exclusion of trans women in particular. Now, Beth Elliott was a trans woman who actually served as vice president for the San Francisco chapter of Daughters of Bilitis for 2 years. And it took a change in the whole structure of their national board in order to push her out. And she's actually the musician, if you remember from your homework you had, that opened for that women's conference.
Oh, perfect.
And left right afterwards.
Yes.
Because they were like, oh,
okay,
you're not a woman. You are... The organizer of that conference said that she was a cheap imitation of womanhood.
Oh, Lord.
And that the very existence of her was a mockery. Yeah, that woman, I swear. Oh. But we're getting off track. But so they did face some controversy later in the mid and late 70s when it came to trans inclusion as well as butch inclusion. You know, and again, part of that early on had to do with anyone who was cross-dressing. This included women in masculine clothing. You could be arrested. And so in order for cops not to raid these meetings, it was strictly mandated. You had to dress femme. You had to wear the dress and the stockings and the heels, and they checked you on the way in to each meeting.
Yeah, there were different cities across, and the rules varied depending on where it was. But it was pretty common that you had to wear at least 3 articles of clothing that matches your gender and sex.
Right.
Back then, they didn't really have the whole sex and gender are two separate concepts.
Right.
It was, if your plumbing doesn't match your clothing, you're out.
Right.
So, like, if a guy was wearing women's underwear underneath, or a woman was wearing male underwear underneath, it would be a big problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So since they had those issues in particular, those I think were really what was the downfall as the 70s progressed. By late 1970s, the Daughters of Bilitis had kind of disbanded officially. Even though one of the chapters kind of limped on until the early 90s, it was not really associated anymore with the national board. So for all its faults, it did, however, kind of lay the foundation for more lesbian and women-specific gay organizations to kind of rise up and find their voice.
Some other events that happened before Stonewall that were kind of catalysts. They were showing a increase in the community being fed up with what was going on. They were fed up with the abuse and the extortion and the jail and wanting to finally fight for their rights in a very physical, in your face kind of way. So in August of 1966, in San Francisco, the Tenderloin district, there was a 24-hour cafeteria called Compton's Cafeteria.
Okay.
On an August evening, that was a restaurant that a lot of people who were queer, they were gay, they were cross-dressers, they were drag queens, hung out at. Well...
Good hours, why could I not?
Right. But it was also very common for them to get the police called on them.
But they're targeted because of the audience.
They're targeted because of their appearance and hanging out.
Yeah.
So at one point, an officer came in and he was trying to arrest some of the individuals. Well, he ended up manhandling one of the drag queens and she her coffee in his face.
Whoopsies. And I whoop.
This erupted chaos. People started throwing plates of food.
Food fight.
It was food fight, but they were throwing the plates and the dishes and the silverware and everything.
Good for you, girl. Good for you.
Right? It ended up leading to 2 nights of protests and resistance at the cafeteria.
Well, they are open 24/7. They were ready.
They were.
One of the big things that came out of this is that it led to the organization of the National Transsexual Counseling Unit in the late 60s, which was the first official transsexual group.
Okay.
Organization.
Was it like a advocacy group or like a consult? I mean,
it wasn't a counseling group.
Was it like so you could get support, like emotional support, like you could call in, or is it more of like?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I think they did advocacy. From what I understand, they did advocacy stuff, but they also did a lot of counseling for individuals who identified
some visibility for
as
them.
trans.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you don't feel so alone.
Right.
That same year, actually a little bit earlier, April 21st, in New York City, the Mattachine Society had a Mattachine Society sip-in.
My favorite.
So after some individuals had gotten arrested through entrapment, this was something that was very, very common and heavily used. Police officers would come in plain clothes and they would flirt and they would get patrons of bars or restaurants to admit that they were gay, and then they would arrest them on the spot.
Yep.
Which is super shitty.
Right.
Well, after this happened again, Dick Leitish and two other members from the Mattachine Society decided that they were going to take steps to fight back against this. They got in contact with some reporters from 4 different local news things. And they decided to go out for drinks.
Going out for drinks.
Ordered some drinks, let the bartender pour the drinks, and then we're like, oh, FYI, I am gay. That's not a direct quote, but they made it known to the bartender that they were gay.
Yeah.
At which point the bartender put his hand over the cups and we're like, you know we can't serve you. He did it in front of 4 reporters.
Right.
So the next morning, it was on the front page of all of these different newspapers and things like that. Because, again, it's the 60s. There's only, 3 news stations, but there's still a lot of newspapers. Out of that, while it didn't lead to an immediate protest, it did lead to 2 different lawsuits. Mm-hmm. The first lawsuit struck down the New York State Liquor Authority's practice of pulling licenses for locations that sold to queer clientele.
Right.
Which meant that suddenly gay bars could actually start openly being out there, kind of, at least
I could legally serve you a drink.
Yes, you could legally serve me a drink. The other one was that there was an agreement reached between the New York City mayor, John Lindsay, and the offices that were in the suit, the individuals, that they would end entrapment by police within gay bars and establishments. So that was really big, since that was one of the top ways that they were getting people.
Yeah.
So the Mac Daddy of events in Pride history. This is really both the largest and the most well-known of the events that kind of literally led up to Pride. On June 28th, 1969, the Stonewall Inn was filled with patrons. Now, the Stonewall Inn, we were lucky enough to be there a couple of months ago.
We were.
And it's a small
See
bar.
last week's episode for that adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small bar. It was one of the few places in New York that you could go and dance with individuals of the same... it's one of the only places where individuals could come dress as they want to dress and dance with members of the same sex.
Woohoo!
Yes. Now, the bar was used to getting raided on the regular.
Right.
But they would normally get a tip-off.
Right.
So they knew something was coming. They could, scatter real quick and make sure that...
How did they manage that?
Often what would happen is individuals at the police station who had maybe family members or friends or secret partners would call...
Or a little greased palm. Whatever gets
the
it done.
The mafia owned the bar, and they were extorting people.
There it is.
But a lot of times what would happen is somebody would go, oh, fuck, my partner might be there.
Right.
This is before the land of cell phones, so they'd have to call the house that the person lived in and go, is so-and-so out tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need to call them and tell them no. Or call the bar, hey.
Is so-and-so there?
Is so-and-so there? Or if it's just a general tip-off, it would be, hey, raid at this time.
My grandmother called a bar looking for me once. I had a cell phone. She just couldn't figure out how to use it. Anyway.
So this night, they didn't get any calls. The reason that they didn't get the tip-off call is because they were receiving so many calls that night that they took the phone off the hook.
And just
Why?
Because the bartenders are busy. They're trying to serve drinks. It's a busy night. And, people just keep calling for random people. So they were just to get it to stop calling.
And how did that turn out for you?
It didn't turn out real great. So at 1:20 in the morning, on the morning of the 28th, the bar was raided. A group of police officers showed up and said, we're raiding you guys. Unfortunately, this was common, but they were really, really brutal during these. People would get beat. If they suspected you of being a crossdresser, they would literally strip you down.
And look at your hoo-ha.
And strip search to make sure that your clothing and your plumbing are the same. It was really, really shitty.
Dehumanizing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, the only people who could get arrested they would arrest the bartenders and such,
right.
The staff, for not having licenses. Gotcha. Because it was technically a bottle club.
Mm-hmm. Bring your own.
So you brought your own bottle. So they couldn't get in trouble with that, but they, you don't have a service for this kind of thing. Well, as they were dragging people out and everything, they started roughing up Storm, who was their bouncer at the time. And people just fucking had enough. So there's lots of different accounts, but the most commonly attributed account is that Marsha P. Johnson threw her shoe. Now, she was a tall woman, probably large feet. If you've ever had a drag queen's shoe thrown at you, it's gonna hurt.
Yes.
Like a brick.
Yes.
So there are some accounts that say she threw a brick. Most accounts say she threw a shoe. That then triggered a riot. And the cops ended up getting trapped in the bar.
Not the place you want to be.
Mm-mm.
On the first night, it's estimated that more than 500 people at 2 in the morning showed up.
Call your friends. Call your friends' friends.
The whole area, Christopher Street, which was kind of gay little mecca.
And still is.
Yeah.
It is. But it was quietly gay.
It was quiet a gay mecca then.
Quieter about it. On the second night, they had over 1,000 people. What came out of that was, one, it got huge coverage.
Right.
We had, national coverage of this big event that was going on. And it gave birth to Pride. But Pride wasn't what we think of as Pride nowadays. Pride was actually a march. Mm-hmm. It was a rights march. And so the first Pride was held a year later. The same weekend, there are 3 Prides that all happened in 2 days. On the 27th, the Chicago Gay Liberation March, and then it was also the Gay Inn in San Francisco. Both of those were like the first liberation marches in other cities. And then on the 28th was the Christopher Street Liberation Day.
Right. In memoriam of the original riot.
Right. Because a lot of people call the Stonewall Riots the Christopher Street Liberation.
Sure.
Liberating Christopher Street. Because that's where Stonewall is.
From the clutches of the tyrants.
That then kind of morphed as time went on from this very somber, very, angry, we want to be treated like fucking humans, goddammit.
Right.
Into what we have now, which is a lot of times more of a celebration of where we've come.
Right. Yeah.
We still have so much. A lot of people don't realize the level of work that still needs to be done. The number of rights that we still don't have for the queer and trans communities.
There's loads of barriers. Loads of barriers, but it's important to celebrate our wins.
Absolutely.
But it's as you said, it's very important to remember, especially during Pride Month, that we still got work to do.
Yep. And remember the fact that this started as a riot.
Yes.
We were fighting with shoes and bricks and tooth and nail.
As a European, I do love a good riot. So sign me up.
Yep. And then shortly after Stonewall, we actually had, and one of her statements referred to lesbians as a lavender menace. And so then Susan Brownmiller, who was a journalist at the time, wanted to dismiss that as they were no real threat. They're simply lavender herring.
Lavender herring instead of a red herring,
and published that to show that so they're not a threat. They couldn't do any harm to us.
They were herring.
And so actually an art student heard that and was like, "Fuck this! I'm going to make a shirt." And she made
dangerous. Damn it!
She made a shirt and it said lavender herring on it, and
it became a hit.
People
loved the herring shirt.
It turned into what was known as the Lavender Menace, and so they actually came and showed up to the second Congress to Unite Women's meeting. The first one, the lesbians were pulled from the program. And so they're like, you know what? We're going to take a stand. And so they showed up. The leader was disguised as an electrician, saying they were there to do show work. And after the opening, the keynote speech.
Because they wanted to let Beth Elliott perform.
Yes, they wanted to let her perform before she scooted out because, quote unquote, not a real woman. They shut off all the lights.
Yes, so in case you didn't catch that, the lesbians dressed up like little electricians, and these bitches bought it.
Yep.
And they turned off the lights in the auditorium.
Yep. And so once they turned off the lights, the groups for the lesbians got up on stage with their signs and everything. The lights came back on, and it was basically to protest and show, no, lesbian rights are feminist rights. We deserve a place in this movement. And then it was the woman-identified women was kind of like their manifesto that they sold after. And they actually got a lot of support from those in the crowd who were like, you know what? They're saying something.
There was a surprising amount of support from the people attending this conference.
Yes, not
it was
the board.
The leadership that was the problem.
Yes.
So as you said, Friedman actually allowed it to be on the agenda. The night before, deleted everything from the agenda. Literally erased lesbians from the feminist movement with a stroke of a typewriter. How dare you?
So infuriating, but a fun little
tidbit of anger for you.
Yes. And then we were talking some about the wins that we have accomplished, the victories that we have gained since the start of this movement, getting it rolling for a force. And sadly, they're a lot more recent than you might think.
Yeah.
So the first one I want to talk about is kind of the quote-unquote equivalent of no longer being illegal to be gay. And that was in 2003, sodomy was no longer an arrestable offense after the Lawrence versus Texas case. So even though you couldn't necessarily be arrested for being gay, you could be arrested for partaking in sodomy, which is male-on-male sex.
Yeah, which is booty sex. But it also applied to the heteros.
It did, especially, I think...
But you weren't getting arrested for that.
At the end, there were 13 states that still considered it to be a crime between, or arrestable offense between male and woman as well.
That was more had to do with the Bible, I think, isn't it?
Probably.
I think they both do. But
Yes.
so to be clear, 2003.
Yep.
It is 2020.
It is
2003, federally no longer a crime, arrestable crime, sodomy, which is basically an archaic loophole for catching gay people.
Yes.
That's what that is, guys. That's what that means. It means up until 2003, you technically could have been arrested in the United States for having gay sex.
Yep.
That's abominable, but that is how it is. But
Yeah.
thank goodness we're past 2003 now.
Right. And
Next
so
angry fact. Let's go.
One of the other key turning points, and at least for me, it was one of the biggest that I've noted because it was one that I was old enough to comprehend and one that didn't necessarily directly affect me, but affected people I cared about and now would kind of affect me.
Okay.
And that was in 2015, we gained the right for same-sex marriage in the 14th Amendment.
There you go. There it is. Federally accepted.
Yep. So that was one of the really big key points. And before this, there were states that did allow gay marriage. However, as part of the Defense of Marriage Act from, I think, like 1999, no state had to recognize it if someone came in from out of state. So if you were married in one state and you came back to live in a different state or you had to move for work, your marriage could just be like, oh, nope, that actually doesn't exist. That never happened. You don't have those rights.
And this is something that has happened in more than just the queer community.
Right.
If you look up
Interracial couples?
Interracial couples were the 1950s. If you look up Loving,
Yes.
won the movie. My heart. If either of you watched it,
I have not seen it.
I think
Am I going to cry?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
you will.
Oh, man. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's a crying movie.
All right, more champagne.
But it's specifically, the movie is about a couple, the Lovings, who are an interracial couple who get arrested. They're beaten, everything because
I think I know their story, but I
Yes.
don't think I've seen the film version of that story.
They were the couple who actually went to fought their way
Yeah.
up to the
Okay. So
court
no, I do know of them.
get
I
it.
just haven't seen the movie. I would like to.
So
see
this
that,
is,
yes.
controlling who we can marry is something that the U.S. has had a lot of fun at controlling, specifically minorities and those people who are oppressed.
Right. Perpetually.
Yeah. Perpetually.
Yay, imperialism. Anyway,
And
next
so
one.
The next one is also a lot more recent. In 2018, being transgender was no longer considered a mental health disorder ruled by the World Health Organization.
World Health Organization, guys. World Health
So
Organization.
that means that the ICD-10 codes and ICD-9 codes could no longer have that as a descriptor as an ailment for them when they're being checked into hospitals, mental health places.
My dear
anything.
transgender siblings, you're not ill. You're
You are
beautiful,
not.
and we love you.
You are valid. Love every second of you.
Now you're legally valid.
Now you're...
Which is crap. Oh my god, the fact that we had to legally validate human beings is just... It boggles your mind when you think about it, but like that's the reality. You know what I mean? That's the reality. It was like 2 years ago, human beings got the stamp to say, oh yes, you're a human being. You exist.
And then this year, in fact, earlier this month, I actually think was it only last week? The 15th?
It was the 15th of June 2020.
Happy Pride.
We have the Supreme Court officially ruled that being gay, transgender, LGBTQIA+, you cannot be fired specifically for that.
So under the
Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Your sexuality and your gender are protected traits.
Yes.
That's the important part.
Yep.
And it won in a 6-3 ruling.
Go fuck yourself.
Shout out to Amy Stevens.
Yes.
Who is the tenacious woman who fought her way through that.
So, as far as those are really like the key turning
big
points. Like,
landmarks,
those are
big
big
landmarks.
wins. Those are like big.
So we can get
things
married.
recognized.
What about
So we
adoption?
Adoption is still kind of an iffy subject. So, same-sex adoption as of 2016 was legal. However, it's not legal across the board. There's still a lot of
federally.
It's not federally legal.
Okay.
So there are still a lot of states who you can apply for adoption, but there's no legal backing if you're denied for being gay.
Okay.
And then there's also states can deny based on marriage statuses. So it may be completely legal in your state as a same-sex couple to adopt if you're married legally. However, if you are just partnered or if you are a single individual, you can be discriminated against during the adoption process for that. And then there's also the states that allow it to be denied based on religious biases. So if it's think Bible Belt, your state's government thinks that, oh, that's against the Bible, so we're going to deny you. It can be upheld for you to not be able to proceed with the adoption.
Eating shellfish, but you're giving these people a baby. Oh my God, please.
So nice when they can like pick and choose what they actually want to hold up.
That's so nice. Such a pleasure. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's disheartening, but also we have some good wins on there. Important landmark wins. So that's good that we have.
And the important thing is there are a lot of people who are fighting.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who are standing up for
we have allies.
Rights. We have allies.
And we have people in the community that are fighting for it as well.
Yep.
There's more of us than you think. There's more of us than you'd like to admit.
We're everywhere.
Just so you know.
I want to wrap back to something that I think is really, really important about the lavender scare.
Sure.
So I had the chance last year to sit in on a screening of the movie Lavender Scare.
Okay.
Which was based off of and done by, I believe, Dr. Johnson.
Okay.
But David Johnson, he is a professor at the University of South Florida who studies these things in particular.
Go Bulls!
So it was an amazing discussion, and it was a really, the movie made me like whimper.
Like I don't know if I throw a table or weep or just hug everybody. I don't know.
Seeing, because the way it was written was very interesting. It was from the writings and the experiences of people who lived through it.
Right.
And one of the things that was so impactful for me was the impact that the Lavender Scare had on government jobs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the biggest and most widespread problems that happened that were directly related to the Lavender Scare were the removal of individuals from positions within government. So McCarthy went in there and said, we can't have these people in there. It was a lot of like, the gays are all communists.
Right.
The gays are dangerous. And so
dangerously sexy.
Thousands and thousands of people lost their jobs.
Yes, in mass. In mass.
Just wiped out.
Yep.
Regardless of their, service career.
Nope.
Even if you were just suspected.
Yes.
Yep. They would, bring you in and interview you to determine if you were gay or not.
They'd interview your families.
Was there like a little device like boop, boop, boop? Oh, that one's gay.
Yeah.
Like I want some made up little vacuum that like poops.
Maybe that's where the gaydar got invented.
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
That's it.
But,
brilliant.
Yeah. So it impacted so many people. And a lot of times what we think about when we think of history is, it's in the past. These things were terrible and they happened. But we don't really think about the way they impact the world today. One of the things that I actually didn't know until I went to this discussion, props for the Office of Multicultural Affairs for putting it all together. USF is my alma mater, so I still go back for events sometimes.
Yeah.
One of the things I didn't realize was that there was a building on campus named after one of the individuals who led the basically gay witch hunts, the Lavender Scare, in Florida.
Oh, wow.
You have a building named after them.
Yep.
You should change that building's name.
So there are
to literally anything.
It is the C.Y. Bill Young Hall, which is the ROCC building.
Oh, that makes sense. But this is a brand new building. It's not like this was named, 30 years ago. This was named in the last, 10-ish years, I think.
No.
Burn it down. Or just rename it. You could just rename it. I mean...
It's a very nice building. The people who take classes there are very awesome.
Rename your building.
Rename it.
To literally anything.
And there are petitions on campus to try to make that happen. But there's very little traction on it.
Well, because you're poor. Well, I mean, you named buildings after people that pay for things.
Right. Well, they named it because he had such an instrumental role in the University of South Florida's, like, history.
Money.
Yeah. And, you know, weeding out the gays.
Quote.
Yeah. So
I feel like it should be like, no, we should name... I'm sure USF has better people in the history to pick from.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, wait.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have a significant number.
Let's talk a little bit about, let's round this up a little bit for our personal experiences with Pride. And I'm going to look at Kaitlyn here.
Oh, gosh.
Because you're the newest.
Oh, no! Newest to the world, young little flower. Walk us through an experience you've had with Pride, whether it's like she's talking about this great film and lecture she went to, an education experience, a party you went to, emotions you felt, knock yourself out.
So for me, I am baby queer TM. But I've always been, looking back, I've always been part of the LGBTQIA plus community.
What a mouthful.
It is, but it's worth it. And so, but it's never something I really identified with. It's not something, my mom wasn't against it, but it was one of those things, I know you are, but just don't let anyone else find out. And it was one of those things where it's more from a selfish standpoint rather than I just don't want you getting hurt by anyone's standpoint.
You know, as long as you spent in the closet, you should be able to pick your clothes out faster.
Oh, damn. She just got called out.
Oh, the library's open. Just kidding. Keep going. That one's for you, Topher. There you go.
So I spent a lot of my time I didn't really research anything. I didn't know anything. It was honestly not until probably 3 or 4-ish years ago that I even knew what Stonewall was.
Right.
I didn't have a reason to look into it because this obviously wasn't an identity trait that I could take on.
Quote, didn't apply to you.
It didn't apply to me. And so I wasn't a part of it. And I didn't know the struggles of it. And so after kind of getting older, turning 18, kind of coming more to terms with...
getting older. Oh my God. Keep going.
Well, when we're talking middle school, yes, 18's older.
Yes.
And so I started to look into it a little bit more, but still I was consistently in heteronormative relationships. It wasn't until about 2 or 3 years ago that I was like, you know what? I found this word. I think this word is me. I think I'm asexual. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not really attracted to people sexually, especially not men. I'm not really attracted to men sexually. And so
you can just say I'm not attracted to men. You don't have to qualify with like I'm not really. I'm just giving you confidence.
Okay.
You can
she's still kind of
coming out of that.
As we are all evolving.
Yes.
You're just evolving with the language.
Yes.
You can make definitive choices.
So many evolvements, especially over the past year and a half.
Right. Well, let me derail you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But I got to attend my first Pride last year.
Woohoo!
So 2019, first Pride ever. First time really owning the fact that I was a part of the LGBTQIA community. And it was one of the identities that still has a lot of pushback from other people in that community. A lot of people do not see asexual as a valid sexual identity. Mm-hmm. Big
I'm
middle finger
just
to the
wagging my middle finger at those people.
Especially for people who are cis and in heteronormative relationships, which I was.
Right.
And so it was kind of bittersweet. I found I got to walk in the parade.
Oh, fun. That's always fun. Do that if you can.
Yes, it was so much fun. I got
drink water.
I got to walk with the critters, and so like leather fetish pride type float was really, really awesome. A lot of camaraderie, and so in a sea of rainbow, I spotted black, gray, white, and purple.
Like, oh hey.
I was like, and so my little feelers were going. Those are my people. Mm-hmm. And so I did a thing that I don't normally do, and I ran up to complete strangers and was like, oh my God, you have my flag. I have my flag too. And so it was really great to talk to all of them. We actually all knew each other online through the Asexuals of Florida Facebook group.
There you go.
We have a Facebook group.
There you go.
And so I got to talk with them some, and it was really, really awesome. And I think the moment that really stood out for me was I got to walk on the parade. We were one of the last floats. And so we waited a really long time. Everyone was tired. At that point, I was kind of like, okay, this is really fun. This is really awesome. But also I'm tired and hungry because I haven't eaten since 10 a.m. and it's now 8:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
But as we were walking the path, we had...
Sounds like poor planning on your part, but go ahead.
Bring snacks to Pride, people. You need
snacks
them.
I did not know. And
Nobody
the person I was with did not plan very well.
That sounds about right. Anyway.
And so I got to go and... walk in the parade. So I was walking with all the critters, and I got to carry my ace flag on a pole. And we were getting towards the end. A lot of people were already starting to leave because, it's the end.
Right.
Everyone's tired. Everyone's been out all day partying. They had concerts and drag shows and all sorts of awesome things. And out of the blue, to this day, I couldn't see who screamed it, but someone screamed, "Oh my God, she has an ace flag. She's me. I'm here." And I was like, my heart.
Like, wow, that literally just happened to me, so good for you too.
Right. And so it was one of those things where getting to see that representation matters, and for so long I was so scared to own that quote. As someone who, I've had sex in the past, so I'm not asexual. Well, I mean, I'm in a relationship where I have sex. I'm not asexual. But the basis of asexual is you just don't feel sexual attraction to people. It doesn't change. There are people who have kids who are asexual. Right. Things like that. And so it was getting to see, no, representation matters, and I actually got to be that for someone else.
After someone just did it for you.
After someone just did it for me literally 30 minutes earlier.
Pass it along.
And so that was probably my big pride moment of, no, this is a thing. I'm supposed to be here.
Yes, you are.
This is awesome.
Yes, you are. Pride is a reflection of radical sex. And asexuality is still a version of radical sex because most people can't fucking wrap their heads around it.
Nope.
So you deserve to be there just like everybody else. Good for you. Legend fun.
I did the thing.
FYI, you did that thing almost exactly a year ago. It was yesterday.
It was.
I checked the photo.
Social media was like, hey, it was a year ago.
I went and checked our photos.
It was yesterday, a year ago.
It was.
Is your story as wholesome like that? Am I gonna get a cavity as well? Is it?
So my experience with Pride, she was joking earlier about how she's only had one Pride, and I'm like, girl, I didn't go to my first Pride till I was 30.
Right.
I don't actually remember when my first Pride was.
I don't either.
It's all a blur. Since then, I've been able to walk in Pride parades. If you are walking a Pride parade, bring extra hydration and snacks. It always takes longer than they tell you it's going to. Yeah, so I've gotten to walk, which is an awesome experience to be able to walk along and be that, smiling, awesome, crazy person marching along. And seeing all of the different types of people, the different age groups along the whole thing. Yeah. It's pretty fucking awesome.
I love seeing old folks at Pride. Really old folks. I'm like, please have an umbrella. But yes.
Yes. Because depending on which time the Pride is happening, greatly changes that.
Oh, yeah.
Daytime, you have more families and things like that come out. The night prides tend to be
sexy pride.
The Pride after dark, where the lots more ridiculous sexiness happen. My experience with Pride is the whole month of June has kind of become a time for me to reflect back on history, both my own personal history and our community's history. Yeah, and also kind of a time to reignite the flame of getting out there and getting shit done. Yeah. And being a person who is actively involved. That has had to change over the years because when I first started going to Prides, I wasn't sick.
Right. The health concerns you have.
My health concerns have dramatically changed the way that I have to interact with events like that. Right. Because I don't do extreme temperature shifts. I don't do, direct sun a lot. There's a lot of different things I have to think about. And so sometimes I have to find creative ways to be involved.
To be part of it.
To be a part of it and still feel like I'm making a difference in my community.
Right. And still taking care of yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Because
You
I'm not allowed to break my Sir Alpha's property.
No, you're not.
And you can't do a lot of good if you aren't here.
Yes.
So what about Madam Hexe?
Oh, mine is not nearly as exciting or heartwarming as that.
Yeah, yours was so sweet. I was like, I can't follow that.
Right, yeah, I was like, oh, it's so sweet. It's so wholesome. And I'm just like, wow, I was just excited to be on the back of a dyke for bike. Like,
I mean, that is exciting too.
That was really exciting.
That was actually, that was here. That was in the States. That was, I think that might have been St. Pete Pride a couple of years ago. Might have been St. Pete Pride at one point a couple of years ago.
Did we walk in the same parade? And not know
Probably.
it?
Maybe it was several years ago. So it was several years
Is it
ago.
hot as balls?
It always is.
It's Florida.
Florida in June. It's always hot as balls.
True.
But I was a young cute thing in a rainbow bikini, and and you know, I was towards the back of the parade because I'd been drinking. And I was like, I don't know, I'm just here because it's fun, and I went to them in Europe, and they're always a blast, and who cares? And so I was by myself because, I mean, there was like a group of people that went, but I wasn't really friends with them. So
Yeah.
I was just like, bye.
Goodbye.
And I had stumbled up to this group of very butch lesbian women on all their like touring style motorcycles. You know, they all got like, they're basically
bikes.
Cars, okay? They're decked out. They got like the seats and the cup holders and speaker system, big flags off the back. I was like, this is ridiculous. I love it. And I had admired one woman's bike. I said, hey, I like your bike. And she was like, do you want to ride in the parade? I was like, fuck yes, I do! So I never got that tank top back. I just threw it off and then hopped on the back of this motorcycle and, I mean, I say rode away, but, you know, inched along in the parade. And so then you're like this cute thing on the back of they were dykes on bikes. And just a couple also just women on motorcycles as well that were not affiliated. And you're just like having a good time, throwing beads and shit on the back of a motorcycle with a hot butch in front of you.
Nice.
How could I not have had fun?
Part of me really wants to do that. If you are unaware, both Madam Hexe and myself ride motorcycles.
Yes.
I really want to do it. And then the other part of me remembers how slow they have to go.
Yeah.
The whole time.
This is when I'm like, ooh, can we just schedule Pride in Florida for like December?
Right.
I know, historical context, but fuck, it's hot here. One time maybe we'll endure.
Yeah.
We'll bring a backup for you, someone who can ride your bike. So if you, for health reasons, just like, I can't, someone else can scoot your bike along.
As long as I dress appropriately.
Yeah,
and I have enough, like, have a water. Like, I will be that person who wears a
I will
camelback.
probably drive my motorcycle in the bikini this time because I am not wearing full leathers on a motorcycle, inching along in Florida with this 1,000-degree engine between my legs. Absolutely not.
I know that Alpha, I think is first year going to the night quote night parade.
That happens during the day
because sun doesn't go until 9.
Yeah.
Right.
He wore high shines.
Ooh.
The guys wore high shines.
Oh.
And it literally melted like off of their shoes.
Oh my god.
Because it's so hot. And like I know people whose like soles of their boots and stuff have like started melting into the asphalt.
Oh, the insides of my boots melted to my sock.
All right. So we went through our Pride events.
Yeah.
We went through our Pride history. We went through our personal Pride history.
Yes.
And we have learned that we have come a long way, but we still have a really long way to go.
Yes.
And this was legitimately
an overview.
Just scratching
barely
scratching the surface of
do you a favor, pick up
American
a book, look it up.
LGBT history. Like it really, really is.
Talk to your elders. Do some research. Like it's fascinating. It's infuriating and it's fascinating and it's inspiring. You know,
and if you
go out and party, have fun during Pride. You should. You should celebrate their victories, but you should also remember that they suffered for these victories, and we will continue to suffer if we don't continue pushing and we don't continue fighting.
And if you are one of those elders, regardless of whether you want to have the elder title or not, if you grew up during these times, if you experienced these times, pass your knowledge on.
Tell your stories, please. We're hungry.
We are.
You know, a lot of people think that the younger generation, like, oh, they don't care. No, they care. They just don't know it's there to grab at.
They don't know where to look. So do us all a favor and speak up. You know, whether you're at an event, in an official capacity, or even just one-on-one with people, because that works really well too sometimes.
But you know. I know our family is each one teach one.
Yeah, that's good.
So
it's a good strategy.
Yeah. All right.
So enjoy Pride, happy Pride. We love you all.
Yes.
And remember,
trouble comes in threes.
And get fucked.
That one was really loud.